Mhairi Black, hello. How are you? You well?
I don't know how I feel after that, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, go on.
So we've just had PMQs there, and when you're in the room, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't quite entertaining, because I've never seen anything like this before. But then when you remember it's real people's lives, that suddenly takes the joy out of it a little. So yeah, it's just absolutely bizarre, uncharted territory just now.
Yeah, there's that sense of schadenfreude and kind of hilarity almost at the ineptitude and the collapse of the government and their authority, and then you're very acutely aware or reminded of the scale of the problems the country faces, the scale of the cold, the hunger, the poverty that the country exists right now, and it's almost like a fever dream. It's like a weird dual reality.
It's like we're in Jacob Rees-Mogg's nightmare. You know, it's just honestly dire, really dire. Oh well, without the U-turns it would be a dream. But it's just been like, I mean, so the Prime Minister stood up there today and was given commitments. For example, she committed to maintaining the triple lock on pensions. But last week she said there wasn't going to be any public cuts, and she can't even go a week without doing a complete U-turn, you know, and she's dizzy by now. It's unbelievable what's happening. And even when you look at the faces on the Tories behind her, they're not very good at hiding the disdain that they feel for her. So I don't know how this is going to end. I really don't.
I mean, on that point about the triple lock on the pensions, Jeremy Hunt was saying, I think it was only a few days ago, that was up for grabs as now, and yet the Prime Minister's contradicting him. Just a word, though, on what you're saying there about the faces of the Tory backbenchers, because it's a perspective that people watching on the cameras, you can't always see what the rest of the people in the chamber are looking like, how they're reacting to things. You have that perspective that we don't. So tell us, what's that like?
Well, you're absolutely right. So the camera doesn't always, in fact, rarely just gets across just what the atmosphere's like inside. So it's, well, when she came in, the only people cheering were the opposition, you know, which is the first time I've seen that happen. But even when she's answering questions, like all the people who are, you know, strategically placed around her for the camera view, they're all on her payroll. Like, if she goes, they stop getting their extra money, so that's why they're shouting. But everybody else, it's just stonewalled silence. So it's I don't know.
Could you give us an explanation of how we ended up in this position, how Liz Truss has got to where she is? Because until about 3 months ago, most people didn't have a clue who Liz Truss was, and now they're getting to know her. And let's say they're learning some things about her.
Yep. Well, see, it's quite interesting because not only are the Conservative Party completely disconnected from reality, but I think they're also actually disconnected from their own members, because it was an interesting leadership campaign in that Liz Truss didn't have the backing of, I think she had very few MPs actually supporting her, and yet when it went to the membership, she won. So there's clearly a bit of discord there. And I don't know, I can't speak for Conservative members, but I think a lot of them are going to start getting a fright every time she opens her mouth, frankly.
She has an opportunity, doesn't she? They talk about these set-piece moments, like the keynote speech at the party conference, or a session of PMQs where people go, "Oh, this is an opportunity to reset the agenda and get the Premiership back on track." And then she starts speaking, and I guess maybe in a time like this, it's where Boris Johnson would kind of be able to blag his way through, and because she doesn't even have that characteristic or skill, she's all at sea.
Exactly. I mean, I actually think in many ways, if you look back since Brexit, it's been slowly, this has been coming because it's been consecutive Conservative governments and each one has been in crisis about things that absolutely could have been prevented or thought about or discussed in a room, before going in front of the Commons. But no, apparently not. The arrogance is just ripping out them to such an extent that it's almost as though they're entitled to power. And I think they're starting to realise that, of course, the public are turning against them, their own MPs are turning against them, our own cabinet's turning against her. She'd have a better trip to IKEA with a more secure cabinet than the one she's got now. It's awful.
Obviously, Liz Truss has collapsed in the polls, right? She's down on minus 70%. She's comparable to Vladimir Putin and Prince Andrew at this point. And the shocking or perhaps interesting thing to me is that it's actually basically all down to her own ineptitude. It's not really a strategic masterstroke by the Labour Party that's put her in this position. It's a position of her own making.
Well, certainly from a Scottish perspective, looking at this, I am astounded that Labour haven't been pushing for a vote of no confidence. I can't believe that they're sitting back. And I think part of that is because Labour aren't building a platform for government. They say they are, but there's nothing distinctive about them other than we'll just be here waiting when they finally collapse. And I don't think that's that inspiring. And I think that people deserve better, especially when we're facing the crisis that we are just now. We need to have radical changes. We need to have radical governments in place. And either side of the house, I'm not seeing that just now.
I guess strategically it pays, right, to have someone as inept as that in there as long as possible and for them to do as much damage as possible.
See, but that's if you view politics as a game. And that's what I think that place is terrible for, is people do view it as a, as party point scoring essentially. And while they're all dancing around a chessboard, there's people out here who are losing their homes, people who can't afford to eat, people are dying. That's not an exaggeration to say that. And we're actually only now discovering just how much damage austerity has done since 2010, because this is nothing new. And what they're suggesting is just doing that again on top of all the damage that they've done to everywhere. So it can't survive, because if they get their way, local government's going to collapse, services are going to collapse. And part of me wonders, is that what the Tories are hoping for, so that they can argue to privatise everything? But even at that, if you privatise things just now, it's not going to benefit the public. I mean, I would argue it never does, but even in the immediate, there's no benefit to it, because they've already made clear that when it comes to whose side they're on the side of the millionaires. So
it's quite perverse that even like liberal commentators, now that we've had this U-turn in economic policy from Truss back towards austerity, and they're going, oh, thank God the adults are back in charge, this is calm again. And it's like, I thought this was everything that you opposed in 2010, and we've ended up in this horrifying feedback loop where things are getting progressively worse, to the point now where the left-wing position is to be glad that there are public spending cuts coming. And as you mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for radical reform, radical change. Even if it was to come from the Labour Party, who, if they got like a 400-seat majority, they could overhaul how this country's run. But it's probably not going to happen.
It's probably not, and I think that is a sad state of affairs that Britain's in just now. And I mean, I've struggled to understand why the Conservatives keep getting elected into government, because I'm like, are people not seeing what I'm seeing? This is disaster after disaster. And I think they're starting to get found out now that they're full of hot air half the time. And because politics, especially over the last 10 years, has become sound bites and snippets, we go through focus groups and see what catches attention. And you get to a point where words end up having no meaning anymore. So you've got these folk who've caused chaos. Chaos across the world, never mind just Britain. And yet they're standing there going, we're the adults, as you say. We are the only party that can be trusted with the economy. Liz Truss is the only person who's tanked the economy in a day. Like that, if that's what your greatest achievement is, and you've only been in power for 2 weeks or something, then God help us if she stays in power.
I think that's a really important point you've made there about the reputational significance of this moment. About, well, maybe not for a long time, to be fair. Britain had a reputation of being, maybe not a superpower, but a significant player on the world stage. A reputation for, no matter how misplaced, fair dealing, playing by the rules, etc. And then the rest of the world is kind of looking at the last 6 weeks in Britain and going, what on earth is happening in your country?
I would actually take it back further than that. I think when Brexit happened, I think that's when the rest of the world suddenly went, oh, something's happening in Britain, and started to take a step back. And to end up in a position like Liz Truss saying, I've not decided yet whether the President of France is a friend or foe. You're like, is this your idea of diplomacy? It's incredible. So I think since 2016, we've just seen standards in that place get lower and lower and lower. And I don't think many folk thought that was possible after the expenses scandal and things. And when you think there's been a financial crash in this century, and yet we're now in a worse position than then. You've got to have a talent to run things that badly. So I don't think, I'm not seeing any answers coming out this place, and I think it's time that the public started demanding better as well. And you're already seeing that, one of the Conservative lines just now that they're constantly trailing out is Labour supports the strikes, as if that's going to hurt Labour. Labour should be supporting strikes, but we're starting to see more industries going back to their roots and realising, we deserve better than this. And that's something that I think, particularly since Thatcher, has slowly been tried to be suppressed for decades by numerous Prime Ministers. But hopefully that'll start to change now, because we are seeing more folk going, well, I can't even afford to live, so I might as well be out in the street protesting. I don't have a home anymore.
I think one line I picked up from her was, why won't he condemn the workers? Which is an interesting perspective to take.
That leads you to believe, whose vote is she trying to win?
Yeah, exactly.
And that answers itself.
So for you then, the topic of conversation we've had for the last 10 minutes, presumably every single one of them is an argument in favour of an independent Scotland, right?
I would say so, yes. Even just, I'll take a general election just now, because I do...
Do you think that's likely right now, a general election?
I don't know. I can't see it happening, because that would be Turkey's voting for Christmas. And I've made no secret of the fact I think the Conservative Party is filled with some of the most selfish people under the sun. So there's no chance that they're going to vote to lose their own seats. But in a similar vein, given a few conversations I've had with Conservatives, there's a couple of them that are like, do you know what, we'd rather take it than carry on being part of this. So it's on a sugary peg, put it that way just now. But equally, I think Labour are quite torn themselves, and in terms of, I think they've got their own internal problems that they're going to need to sort through and figure out, what are we going to do in government, or what are we going to promise? So while they're having those conversations, they're quite happy for Liz Truss just to keep messing up. But again, that's where I think, well, you're failing people, because it's not a game. This is real people's lives are being affected. So I don't know, but I'll be front of the queue calling for one.
It's my last question for you, and it's again about your perspective inside that building, because one mechanism the Labour Party could try and bring about that general election, right, is a no confidence vote in the government. The conversations you're having, or the ones you're aware of, do you think the numbers are there from the Tory backbenches? Do you think there's enough of a sense of conscience or the national interest for that to happen?
Not at the moment, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that we get there. And that's actually where today is turning into a key vote for the Tories. So today is a Labour opposition day, and usually, they're great tools for raising issues and to, I suppose, demonstrate the feeling on something, but these votes don't change laws, they're purely performative. And it's now been leaked that the Tories this morning all got an email saying that this Labour opposition day has been turned to a 3-line whip. And the reason they're doing that is because the government themselves want to see who's going to listen to us. We just need to check. If we say it's a 3-line whip, let's see how many Tories actually follow through. So who knows? Do you know what I mean? But by the end of tonight, she could be out the door. It's insane, absolutely. Honestly, it's bizarre. And I said this to you before we started. Even staff in there who go to great lengths to stay impartial, even they're saying to you, my God, this is bad. I've been here 40 years and I've never seen it like this. It's incredible. So, the world is talking about Britain right now for all of the wrong reasons, and we are slowly corroding every goodwill relationship that we have left, and we can't afford to keep doing that. We just can't.
Mhairi Black, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, cheers.
Really appreciate it.